It costs money to borrow. But what are those costs? One of the costs is interest.
Interest is a percentage added on to what you owe. The annual percentage rate, or APR, is a percentage cost of credit and loans on a yearly basis.
APR is key for comparing costs. When you borrow money, you want the APR to be lower because that will be less money that will be added on to your debt.
Even a small change in interest can make a huge difference. Another cost for credit or loans are fees. Fees are added to your loan for a service. Now, some fees are necessary and some might be overpriced or not necessary.
Here's a credit card offer one of my former students received. It's for a credit card with a limit of up to $1,000. A credit limit is the amount of money that you can borrow on the card. Anytime you read the words as low as or up to, it means that you may not get the best interest rate or credit limit. So the student received a card with a $350 credit limit. It had 4 fees: an origination fee, processing fee, a membership fee, and an annual fee. Now each fee was $50, so that means there's a total of $200 in fees on a card with a $350 credit limit. Insult to injury, those $200 in fees were subtracted from his $350 credit limit. So then he was left with a new credit limit of only $150. Well, he didn't know it worked like that, and he charged $200 on this credit card. Well, then he was slapped with a $40 over the credit limit fee, which brought his total to $240. Luckily, he wasn't late with the payment, or else he would have been hit with another fee.
Last year, $60 billion was paid to banks in interest and fees, and none of that was going to principal amount owed.
I'll tell you this, I know the money I'm spending on credit card debt. Just the debt. Not even real things, just the debt. Anyway, I know I could be spending that money on so many better things.
I've gotten stuff mailed to me to my my college address, telling me I'm already pre-approved for a credit card, and I honestly have no idea how they got my address. So, I'm smart enough not to actually go through with it, but it just makes me curious how they get my information. Yeah.
Borrowing fundamentals can help people learn how fast debt can grow. We've already covered the first borrowing fundamental. Borrowing money costs money.
You will pay for what you borrowed, and you will pay for borrowing the money.
The costs of borrowing are interest and fees. The second borrowing fundamental is the more money you borrow, the more money it will cost because you're paying interest and fees on more money.
The third borrowing fundamental is the longer you take to pay off a loan, the more it'll cost you because you're paying interest and fees over a longer period of time.
Let's look at $45,000 in student loans. $45,000 is the principal. This loan has a 6.8% APR. If you pay the loan in 10 years, it will cost you $62,143 to pay it off. If you take 25 years to pay off the loan, it will cost you $93,699 to pay it off.
If you're choosing the longest time period to pay back your loan, it could cost you several $1,000s more. And the same is true if you're only making minimum payments on your credit card. If you make the minimum payment or an amount less than the total you owe, you're charged interest on that balance, and that becomes part of your new balance. The same thing happens each month if you don't fully pay off the credit card. If you're making minimum payments, you're barely paying the interest that you're being charged, so the interest charge becomes part of your balance, and you're charged interest on that. It's being charged interest on interest. It's called compound interest.
Here's a specific example of compound interest. $7,500 in credit card debt with a 20% interest rate would result in a monthly finance charge of $125. That's just interest and not touching the principal amount owed, the $7,500. Let's say you don't pay the $125 finance charge. It would be added into your balance. So $7,500 plus $125 equals your new balance of $7,625. And you would now be charged interest on this amount, 20% at this amount would be $127.08 per month. So your interest and fees, by the way, becomes part of your balance, and you're charged interest on that larger balance. It's how $5,000 can turn into $25,000.
I like to point out that the credit card companies borrow the money at approximately 5% and turn around and loan it to you at 18%, 21%, 28%.
Yeah, my parents taught me a little bit about it. I mean, I think I just kind of had some sense about it. I mean, understanding that credit cards is not money. I mean, when you start from the basic understanding that you can't spend money that you don't have, and when you understand that credit cards are not actually money, it's just kind of an instant loan that is very short term in most cases. If you don't pay it off, within the month, you get crazy interest that gets heaped onto that. I think with that understanding, that's what really kept me out of any kind of super crazy consumer debt. So.
You should be aware of certain things about your credit card. I'm not saying you need to go through your credit card terms and conditions with a fine-tooth comb. There are lawyers who don't understand those things, but you should know certain things about your credit card.
You should know your credit limit so you don't go over it, and you should know your due date so you can pay on time. Your payment has to be received by the due date, not mailed.
Some credit cards have a due time, where even if your payment arrives by the due date, if it doesn't get there by the due time, you'll be charged a late fee.
Know the fees you're being charged, and know your APR, and check each bill to see if it's changed.
Different credit card transactions have different APRs. For instance, a purchase can have a different APR than a balance transfer or a cash advance, so you need to know your APRs.
Some credit cards advertise a fixed interest rate as opposed to a variable interest rate. A fixed rate stays the same, so you know how much you're paying, whereas a variable rate can rise, costing you more money. The thing about fixed credit card interest rates is that they can change. They're not fixed.
Credit cards can change your interest rate if you're late with a payment.
That happened to me too. I was late with a payment on one of my credit cards, and the interest rate shot up on that card. And because of the raised interest rate, I went over my credit limit, and I got a fee for that too.
So this is what it's gotten to? Credit card companies can change your fixed interest rate for any reason.
Credit card companies can change your fixed interest rate at any time, for any reason, so long as they send written notice 45 days prior to the change.
In January of 2008, Businessweek reported that Bank of America was doubling the credit card interest rate of some of its responsible customers based on no apparent deterioration in their credit scores. You can shop around for the best credit card deals. It's interesting to note, according to Consumer Reports, that some of the larger credit card issuers, including Chase, Bank of America, Citibank, and Capital One, they did not get high marks from customers. Check out Consumer Reports for issuers that keep interest rates low, fees to a minimum, and provide good customer service. Remember to not get fooled by freebies like free t-shirts or travel rewards when you're paying several times more than that in interest and fees.
I'd recommend having one credit card with a limit, say $500 or $1,000, and pay it off every month. Otherwise, you're paying to stay in debt. If you must have a balance, keep it under 35% of the credit limit. Spending more affects your credit in a bad way.
Well, a lot of people get the credit card with the excuse that it's going to build their credit. But if they use it incorrectly, it could wreck their credit.
He owes probably like $40,000, but he didn't get a job right out the bat after college. So yeah, he was in debt. He just kept accruing, so he just kept opening credit cards over and over just to pay that off, like bank loans. Yeah, but that's about it. That's pretty bad.
I've been out of school for over a year, and the debt I've accumulated since starting college is killing me. I wondered if I was the only one, since it's not talked about. I've learned that a lot of people are in the same boat. We're not only not getting ahead because of the debt, we're barely making it. And some aren't even doing that. I didn't really have a credit card balance while I was in college. Nothing I couldn't pay off soon. But I did take out some extra student loans. To get by, but also for some discretionary things. I did a lot of rationalizing. There was always something I needed for my film projects. I just always thought I would graduate, get an amazing job, and the coast would be clear.
6 months after graduation, students have to start paying back their student loans, and maybe a credit card too. And they'll be entering a world where expenses have gone up, and their incomes may not be what's expected.
See, a lot of college students, they believe that their money worries are going to be over with graduation and a job. Statistics say otherwise. Starting salaries for college grads are often not enough to make a serious dent in their debt right away. Recent graduates that are strapped, like Allison, are particularly vulnerable if something goes wrong. A loss of income, an unexpected expense like a car breaking down or a health problem.
I was scraping by, and then disaster struck. I found out I had to get my wisdom teeth removed, and my insurance plan didn't cover that. So I had to credit card it. $5,000. But I made a big choice. I decided to move back home and commute to work because I gotta pay more than the minimum payment on my credit card debt. And I really want to pay off my student loans faster than the 25-year plan. I mean, that's thousands of dollars I'd just be throwing away, paying for debt. But I do wish I had borrowed less money. That would be less debt for me to pay back right now.
Imagine a red line. Below that line is debt. Credit card debt, student loan debt, auto loan debt. Above the line is wealth. Getting ahead. The idea is to get out of debt and get above the line. You want to make decisions that protect and build your financial situation and help you get ahead. You want to be careful with decisions that get you behind by creating debt. You can view all your spending and borrowing choices through that lens.
On the other hand, you don't need to be constantly thinking about maximizing wealth. I want you to follow your dreams, your passion, or your calling. But if you are overburdened by debt, you may not have that choice.
If you can't pay for it with cash, which means you don't have money for it, that means you can't afford it.
I don't know. I'd think that, if you really need it, if you want for the convenience, is you can get an ATM card, and then, and also because it's on a limited account, it forces you to think about, what you're spending, and, I've got this much in the bank and I can spend this much. It's not like, I've got this much and, I can pay it off later.
I've listed 3 collegiate financial goals. Finish college, make a rational decision about the amount of student loan debt you take on, and limit your credit card debt.
Well, the fact that college graduates make more money than non-graduates doesn't diminish the need for you to analyze your options.
To ensure you're making a good decision, compare the cost of your education and debt with your expected future income.
You may get a loan for tuition and living expenses, but you'll also have the cost of having the loan.
Use the average federal Stafford loan interest rate of 6.8% and do a 10-year estimate and a 25-year estimate. Have your lender tell you the monthly payments for each estimate. Notice the monthly payments are lower for the longer plans, but you pay a lot more over the life of the loan.
Look online or ask your counselor for income statistics for the profession that you're considering. And when making these comparisons, avoid wild income predictions. Know that the first few years out of college, it may be a struggle with an entry-level income. And most likely after that, it will be a gradual progression. The average teenager believes that they will make over $100,000 a year. According to Census Bureau statistics, fewer than 5% of the U.S. population makes over $100,000 a year.
To save money on the cost of college,